The memory of that day still burns in my mind. The phone rang just as I was scraping the last of my meatloaf from my plate. It was Eleanor's recipe, though mine never tasted quite right without her touch. I glanced at the caller ID, saw my daughter Chloe's name, and smiled despite myself. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Her voice had that familiar warmth, the kind that always made my chest tighten with a mix of love and loneliness. I settled into Eleanor's old recliner, the leather worn smooth from years of her evening reading sessions. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just finished dinner and was about to watch the news." I didn't mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago, or that I'd been staring at Eleanor's photo on the mantel for the better part of an hour. Chloe asked about my eating habits, about the online grocery app she'd shown me. I reassured her that I was eating plenty. But then I made a mistake. I told her about a small scare I had the day before I'd forgotten to turn off the burner under my coffee pot. "Good thing I smelled it burning from the living room," I said. There was a pause. I could picture her frowning in that way she'd inherited from her mother. "Dad, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more regularly." "I'm fine, Chloe, really. How's your business trip going? You're in Phoenix, right?" I tried to change the subject. She laughed a little, but it sounded forced. Then she said she had to go, that she and Brandon had dinner plans with some potential investors. "I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, okay?" There was a click. I thought she had hung up, but then I heard rustling, as if she'd dropped the phone in her purse. But the voices were still there, and the warmth was gone. "Jeremy, you see how he's deteriorating?" Chloe's voice was cold and calculating. "He forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down?" My hand froze on the receiver. A sheet of ice spread through my chest. "It's time for a nursing home, Caitlin." Jeremy's voice cut in, cold and matter-of-fact. "He's a burden, and you know it. Your dad's a good man, but he can't live alone anymore. The house is worth almost $1 million now. With Denver's market, we could probably get $900,000, maybe more." I heard my daughter laugh, a terrible, dismissive sound. "God, Jeremy, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea we're planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused he'll get." The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor that Eleanor and I had installed together 23 years ago. Every board laid by my own hands, every nail driven with thoughts of our family's future. I sat in the sudden silence of my empty house, staring at Eleanor's photograph on the mantel. Her eyes seemed to bore into mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, warning, or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who've already left this world. A cold, hard knot settled in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt just moments before. My hands, weathered from decades of construction work, slowly curled into fists. They thought I was a burden. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and discarded. They were already spending my money, already planning their new life in my grave. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, Eleanor's face watching me from the silver frame on the end table. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath. My legs felt unsteady when I finally stood to turn on the lamp. The warm light fell across the living room we'd furnished piece by piece, each item chosen with care and bought with sacrifice. The burgundy sofa where Chloe used to curl up doing homework. The coffee table I'd built in the garage, sanding it smooth while she played at my feet. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer, where I kept old receipts and papers. My fingers found the folder I was looking for without conscious thought. For 20 years, I'd kept financial records because Eleanor always said, "You never know when you might need them." Inside were University of Southern California tuition receipts, $48,000 over 4 years. I remembered those double shifts, coming home with concrete dust in my hair and plaster under my fingernails. Eleanor would have coffee waiting and would massage my shoulders while I paid bills at this very kitchen table. "Arthur, you're working yourself to death," she'd said one night, watching me calculate how to afford Chloe's spring semester. "She deserves better than we had, Eleanor. She's smart enough for anything." Eleanor had kissed the top of my head. "Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. The wedding receipts were in there, too. $32,000 for one day. I told Chloe we could afford $5,000, maybe 8 if we stretched, but she'd cried about wanting her dream wedding. I'd worked weekends for 6 months installing hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me under the table. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered during our dance, her head on my shoulder, her wedding dress rustling against my rented tuxedo. "I'll never forget this," she'd promised. But she had forgotten. Just like she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit wasn't good enough. Just like she'd forgotten who made the calls to get her that marketing job when she was unemployed for 8 months after graduation. I found the bank statements from 2 years ago after Brandon lost his financial advisor position for reasons they never fully explained. They'd moved in temporarily, just until Brandon found something new. I'd never charged them rent. I'd paid the increased utility bills, bought groceries for 3 adults instead of one lonely widower. Brandon would pat my shoulder and call me the most generous man in California. Chloe would hug me and say, "Dad, we'll pay you back when we get on our feet." They'd been on their feet for over a year now, both working good jobs, both making more money than I ever had, but they'd never mentioned moving out, never mentioned paying me back. The anniversary dinner I'd paid for last month, $200 at that fancy steakhouse downtown because Brandon said they deserved to celebrate. The car repair bill I'd covered when Brandon's BMW needed a new transmission. $3,000 that cleaned out my emergency fund. "Arthur's like a father to me," Brandon had told his friends at their last barbecue, his arm around my shoulders. "I'm so lucky to have married into this family." I'd been proud, actually proud to be the generous father-in-law, the man who took care of his family no matter what it cost him. I walked upstairs to the bedroom Eleanor and I had shared, still unchanged after 2 years. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, her reading glasses folded beside the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept our important papers and pulled out our original house deed. Arthur and Eleanor Vance purchased 1,999. No liens, no co-signers, no complications. My name only now that Eleanor was gone. Standing there in the bedroom where Eleanor had spent her last days, surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass. But underneath it, something harder was forming. They thought I was helpless, confused. They thought they could manage me like a piece of property. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it was time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really was. I walked to my home office and pulled out the business card I'd kept in my desk drawer for 3 years. It was Todd Fisher, a real estate attorney Eleanor had insisted we meet with after her cancer diagnosis, just to make sure our affairs were in order. It was time for another consultation. The next morning, I walked through my house like a stranger seeing it for the first time. But instead of seeing a home, I was seeing what Chloe and Brandon saw: square footage, market value, liquid assets. I picked up Todd Fisher's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. They thought they were dealing with a confused old man who'd be grateful for any scrap of attention they threw him. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Todd's number and listened to it ring, my hands steady as stone. The law offices of Fisher and Associates occupied the second floor of a modest brick building, the kind of place that specialized in helping regular people with real problems. Todd Fisher was a man in his mid-50s with the patient demeanor of a man who'd heard every family horror story twice. His office was lined with law books and family photos, a wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever, the kind of normal life Eleanor and I had tried to build. "Mr. Vance, good to see you again," Todd said, pouring coffee from a small machine in the corner. "I remember you and Eleanor from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." I thanked him, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need to discuss something delicate about my daughter and son-in-law." I told him everything: the phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my house and put me in a nursing home. "Unfortunately, Mr. Vance, this scenario is more common than you'd think," Todd said, leaning back in his chair. "Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? I mean, legally. Let's start with the basics. The house is titled in your name only since your wife's passing, correct?" "That's right. Eleanor and I owned it jointly, but when she died, it transferred to me automatically." Then, legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, and cannot make any decisions about your assets without your explicit consent. The house belongs to you. Period. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. So, if I wanted to sell it myself, you could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision. Todd looked up from his notes. May I ask why you're considering that option? I thought about Chloe's laugh when she'd called me a burden, about Brandon's cold calculation of my worth. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Todd was quiet for a moment. The housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above the asking price. He paused. If you were serious about selling quickly before your daughter and son-in-law return from their trip, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less. But Mr. Vance, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my own hands, Mr. Fisher. I know exactly what I'm doing. We spent the next hour discussing practicalities with Brian Connor, a real estate agent Todd recommended. He was a professional in his early 40s who specialized in quick sales. The sun was setting through Eleanor's bay window, casting a golden light across the room where I had just agreed to sell 25 years of my life. For the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Chloe's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, picturing her in some hotel lobby in Phoenix, wondering why her grateful old father wasn't jumping to answer her call. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Let her stew for a moment. Let her and Brandon make their plans about my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone finally stopped ringing, but I knew she'd call back. She always did when she needed something from the old man. This time, she was going to get much more than she bargained for. The next morning, I called the phone company and had my old landline disconnected. It was a small thing, but it felt like the first cut, a decisive severing of a tie I had held on to for too long. With the phone call to Brian Connor in motion, I started the hardest part, packing up my life. I walked through the house I had built with my own hands, not with sadness, but with a grim determination. I started in the bedroom Eleanor and I had shared. I opened her jewelry box first, the same one I'd given her on our 10th anniversary. I carefully placed our wedding photos inside, along with the novel she'd been reading when she died, the bookmark still marking page 247. My engineering certificates, our important documents, and Eleanor's favorite cookbook with her handwritten notes in the margins were next. These were the essentials of my existence, the only things that truly mattered. I left almost everything else. The furniture, the photo albums chronicling Chloe's childhood, Eleanor's clothes still hanging in the closet, all of it would stay. These things told a story that was no longer mine to tell. While I packed, I called a local storage facility to arrange a unit. I meticulously packed all of Chloe and Brandon's belongings, which were scattered around the house. Their suitcases, their mail on the kitchen counter, it was all evidence that they had been treating my home as their personal storage unit while planning my exile. I labeled their boxes and arranged for them to be picked up and stored. A note was left for them in the kitchen with the storage unit number and a passive-aggressive reminder that they would be responsible for the monthly fees. My next call was to Sunset Manor Apartments, a modest but clean senior community in Highland, a neighborhood a few miles from my old home. The one-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, already furnished with everything I needed to start over. "We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy," said Mrs. Chen, the property manager. "Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mr. Vance." "I'll take it," I said. "I'd like to move in tonight." She didn't ask questions, and I was grateful. That evening, in the gathering dusk, I loaded my truck with my few belongings. I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Davies, my neighbor, watching from her window. She waved, and I waved back, feeling the weight of all the relationships I was severing, all the connections Chloe and Brandon had forced me to cut. I took one last walk through the empty rooms. My footsteps echoed differently now that the house belonged to someone else. In the kitchen, where Eleanor had taught Chloe to bake Christmas cookies. In the living room, where we'd watched Chloe open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom, where Eleanor had taken her last breath while I held her hand. "I'm sorry, honey," I said aloud to Eleanor's memory, "but you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good. I'm finally keeping my promise to you." I locked the new locks with the unfamiliar key and drove away from Maple Street for what might be the last time. My rearview mirror was full of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting when I arrived at Sunset Manor, my truck loaded with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to my new front door, fumbling with the unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside, the small apartment felt like a motel room, functional but soulless, with generic furniture and the lingering smell of industrial carpet cleaner. It felt like exile, but it was exile by choice. I immediately sat down and opened my laptop on the small dining table. The final phase of my plan required one more piece of the puzzle that would give Chloe and Brandon the surprise of their lives. I opened my browser and typed mini surveillance cameras into the search bar. After 30 minutes of research, I found exactly what I needed: a wireless mini camera hidden inside a phone charger. Its specifications were perfect for my engineering mind: Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control, motion-activated recording, and crystal-clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to my phone. I ordered it with expedited shipping, paying the extra $40 to guarantee Thursday delivery. The total cost was $149, an amount that would have made me hesitate 2 weeks ago but barely registered now. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial element, the note that would explain everything when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, I found the right tone, dignified but devastating, loving but final. I wrote in my careful engineer's handwriting, the penmanship Eleanor had always admired. "Dear Chloe and Brandon, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I overheard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I am a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make from selling my house. Well, the house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is safely in my new bank account where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about your own housing situation. Your belongings have been packed and are being stored at Denver Moving and Storage on Kfax Avenue. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad." Thursday afternoon, the FedEx truck arrived with my small box. I spent an hour testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. I then drove to my former house for the last time. I used the garage door opener I'd never given Chloe and Brandon, parking inside to avoid questions from neighbors. My hands shook slightly as I approached the front door. Inside, the house still smelled like home, like Eleanor's lavender sachets and the lemon oil I used on the wooden furniture. But there were new additions that made my chest tight. Chloe and Brandon's suitcases by the stairs, their mail scattered on the kitchen counter, evidence that they'd been treating my house as their personal storage facility while planning my exile. I positioned the camera charger by the front door outlet, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where I planned to hang my note. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level. Standing in my living room one final time, I touched the mantel where Eleanor's photo had sat for 23 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Eleanor and I had filled with love. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered to Eleanor's memory. Justice served. I locked the house with my new key, tested the camera feed one more time from my truck, and drove back to my apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone was ready to alert me the moment Chloe and Brandon discovered their keys no longer worked. I woke Friday morning with the anticipation of a man about to witness justice after years of injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks. and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone, the camera feed showing my empty former doorway. The timestamp showed 5:15 p.m. My phone buzzed with a motion detection alert. A black SUV Brandon's car pulled into the driveway of my former house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the screen. Chloe stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Brandon emerged from the driver's side, pulling their suitcases from the back. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. I watched them approach the front door, Chloe fishing her keys from her purse while Brandon set the luggage down. She inserted her key into the lock I'd had changed just yesterday. The key didn't turn. Chloe frowned, examining her key ring. She tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird." Her voice came through my phone speaker. "My key's not working." Brandon stepped closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the back door." I watched him disappear around the side of the house, while Chloe continued struggling with the front lock. When Brandon returned 3 minutes later, his face had darkened with alarm. "Back door's locked too, and the garage remote isn't working." His voice carried the edge of panic I'd hoped to hear. "Chloe, someone changed these locks." "What?" "That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths." She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling Dad." I watched her dial my old landline, the number I'd had disconnected 3 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled with confusion. No answer. "It's not even going to voicemail. Try his cell phone." "He doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting him one for emergencies." Her voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. Jeremy was examining the windows now, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "There, that one's unlocked. I can boost you up." I watched my daughter climb through the kitchen window I deliberately left unlatched, her business suit catching on the frame. She disappeared inside, and moments later, the front door opened from within. Brandon entered with their suitcases, and both of them stopped dead when they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level. Chloe's hand trembled as she pulled down the envelope with her name, and Brandon's written in my careful script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands as she tore open the seal. Her eyes moved across my words, Brandon reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces change, confusion to shock, to disbelief, to horror. "He sold the house." Chloe's voice rose to a near shriek. "How could he do this to us?" Brandon snatched the note from her hands, reading it again as if the words might change. "That manipulative old bastard. He was playing us the whole time." Chloe was crying now, her careful makeup streaking down her cheeks. "He kept it all. That money was supposed to be our future." "Your future?" Brandon snapped, his mask of a devoted son-in-law finally slipping. "This is your father, Chloe. You should have handled this better." "My fault?" She whirled on him, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. "You're the one who said he was becoming a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. Well, he was a burden. Look what he's done to us." Brandon gestured wildly around the room that was no longer theirs. "We're homeless. Our lease expires next week." The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They were fighting in my living room about being homeless, just as they'd planned to make me homeless in a nursing home. I turned off the camera feed. I'd seen enough. Walking to my small kitchen, I opened the bottle of Ellen's favorite wine I'd saved from the house, a 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Eleanor's photo on the nightstand. "To you, my love." Justice served. The wine tasted like victory. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Chloe trying to reach me through some new method. I deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to my window, I looked out at the Los Angeles skyline, painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my daughter and her husband were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in my former house, they were learning that their burden had become their biggest problem. For the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt completely free. I was no longer anyone's burden. I was my own man again, with my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching ahead like an open road. Arthur Vance had left the building, and he was never coming back. The weekend stretched ahead of me like uncharted territory. I'd never lived anywhere but the house Eleanor and I built together. This tiny apartment felt like exile, but it was an exile by choice. My choice, not theirs. On Saturday morning, I made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchenette and methodically unpacked my belongings. Eleanor's jewelry box on the dresser, my engineering awards on the bookshelf, our wedding photo beside the bed. I drove to the grocery store and bought food for one person. Simple meals that required no effort. The checkout clerk, a young man with kind eyes, asked if I was new to the area. Just moved in, I told him. Starting fresh. Oh. On Sunday morning, I discovered a coffee shop called Brews and Views, just a few blocks from my apartment. The barista, a young woman named Sarah with purple streaks in her hair, made the kind of strong coffee I preferred. "You're new around here," she observed, not prying, just friendly. "Retired engineer," I said, "looking for a keyter life." "Well, you found the right neighborhood for that. Most of our customers are pretty mellow." I sat by the window with my coffee, watching people walk dogs and push strollers, living the kind of normal Saturday morning that Eleanor and I used to treasure. But instead of sadness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. I was ready for this new life. I had survived my daughter's betrayal, punished her greed, and now I was free to build a life on my own terms. The thought was a comfort that no amount of money could buy. I had my memories, my freedom, and my dignity. The weekends passed in a strange rhythm of my new routine. Morning coffee at Brews and Views. Sarah remembered my order and asked about my weekend. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood, discovering a small park with benches where other retirees fed pigeons and read newspapers. I found a sense of peace that had been missing for years, a liberation I hadn't realized was possible. I thought about all the years of sacrifice, all the money spent, all the excuses I had made for Chloe and Brandon. I had believed that love meant protection from consequences. But staring at the empty spaces in my new apartment, I finally understood that Eleanor's warnings had not been a criticism of our daughter, but a protection of her character. My generosity had become a form of enabling, and her betrayal, as painful as it was, had forced me to confront a truth I had been avoiding for years. One evening, I opened my laptop and typed. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment, before I started to draft the final piece of the puzzle. I had given my daughter and her husband everything, and they had repaid me by planning to put me away like a piece of furniture. It was time for the final lesson. I had always been methodical. 25 years as a construction engineer had taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Now, that methodical nature would serve a different purpose. I researched my options, spoke to my lawyer, and made sure every detail was in place. I had already filed all the necessary paperwork, and the transfer of funds was complete. There would be no paper trail leading to my new life. No way for them to track me. I closed my laptop and looked at Eleanor's photo. "You were right, my love," I whispered. "I was too generous. But I've finally learned to take care of myself. I've finally kept my promise to you." The phone sat silent beside me. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. I was no longer a victim, but a survivor. I had been betrayed, but I had refused to be defeated. I had been called a burden, but I had proven to myself and to them that my life had worth. I had my memories, my dignity, and my future. I knew they would continue to call, continue to search, but I also knew that they would never find me. I was a ghost from their past, a painful memory of their greed and betrayal, and I had left them with a lesson they would never forget. Some actions demand consequences, and sometimes the only way to teach love is to be tough. The scales of justice, once tilted by their calculated cruelty, had been balanced again. I looked out at the lights of the city, a man alone but no longer lonely. I was in control of my own destiny, and that was the greatest inheritance of all. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.